I'm making another album, and this podcast is a little late. I've usually been doing these daily podcasts at the end of my day, and I didn't do one at the end of yesterday because I was a very naughty boy yesterday. So today is Tuesday, and yesterday on Monday, after having a great Sunday where I did a full cycle through every song on the album, so I turbo cycled my way through every song on the album. On Monday, yesterday, I completely fell back into old bad habits of finishing things and only got through 3 tracks. Now, I think one of the reasons for that is that I started the day with a Magic Music Machine session, and it was different because I got into a rhythm the previous few days with this turbo cycling thing, and so I was straight into it early morning, and then sort of started tracking how long I was doing things, and so I'd kind of got into that frame of mind. And then there was this thing, and this is often what happens, there was this thing that was different about the day, so that kind of, because the day started like that, I just wasn't on it as much immediately after that session. And that's not an excuse, it's just something to notice. So what I did was I started with track 1 and I got as far as track 3, but the second 2 tracks I spent hours on each of them. Now, I think I got both of them to a point where they're basically done, but essentially having had the situation of one day almost having I don't want to say the word perfect, but a really, really good day of using this turbo cycling method of just going bang, 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 all the way through. Because on Sunday as well, I was doing business stuff too. I was writing emails and various other things, preparing for the workshop. So I was doing other things too, and I still got through the entire album. Then yesterday, it was just sort of getting deep into each of these tracks. And I think in a way, even though I wish in a way I hadn't done that yesterday, having the close proximity of doing it one way, a new way, I think, dare I say it actually feels quite a revolutionary way to finish things, for me anyway. And then on yesterday, just doing it the normal way, right? Doing it the way that I've done it throughout my life, going back to that way. Having that close proximity is allowing me to notice the upsides and downsides of both different approaches, because, they're both incredibly fresh in my mind. Because, of course, no approach is going to be all upside, just as no approach is going to be all downside. Turbo cycling isn't all, there are problems that occur as a result of that approach. And if you're wondering what turbo cycling is, essentially what you do, let's say you're finishing an album with 10 tracks like I am. What I'm doing is doing short sessions on each one, focusing on the highest priority problem, or problems if they're quite small problems, each time. So I'm talking about like half an hour sessions. Sometimes they go a bit longer if they have to, but we're talking half an hour sessions. Just every time you direct listen to the track, you say, okay, what's the one or two, or what are the problems that I would solve if I had to finish this in the next 20 minutes? Focusing on them. And even if it's not done, even if the track isn't done, which it isn't usually at this point, exporting the thing and then moving on to the next one and just going all the way through like that, at a very fast clip. And so that's what turbo cycling is. And it's been really a wonderful way of moving forward with this music, because you maintain this objectivity on each individual track because you're working on so many. Whereas yesterday, looking back on it, there were probably many hours, probably about half of the time maybe, where I was doing things that I probably didn't have to do, and I was doing things which it was taking me longer and longer to do things the longer I spent on it. So the downside of it, however, of turbo cycling, because there is one, is that it can feel like you're not making enough progress on each track in the moment. And that can be a kind of problem because it draws you to doing these long sessions. And I think this is a problem with turbo cycling. You kind of think, oh, I've just got to get to this sort of stage where I think it's finished. Because if I don't do that, then I'm not making enough progress. It's not actually true, though. The other downside with turbo cycling is that there is an enjoyment, right? There is a real enjoyment about getting really into a track. I really do get that. I mean, I think, there's a real pull to kind of, sort of getting properly in the weeds, up to your neck in the things that you're doing, the various different production things that you're doing, which turbo cycling really doesn't allow you to do. And my question, which I think is something of an open question, the question I have for myself is, because as I said, sorry, I keep stopping. I'm still thinking this through, which is why this is a little bit stop-starty. So, I did 3 tracks. One of them, the long session that I did, was very fruitful. However, I'm not sure it needed to be that long in order for it to bear the fruit that it did. Right? I mean, I really enjoyed myself. I mean, I probably did, about 4 hours in total on this track, which is a very long session for me, extremely long session. And if I was to compare the track before, and I have all of this because I export everything, so I did. I compared the track before the very long session and after the very long session. Okay, so I re-recorded a vocal, which sounds much better, but that didn't take very long. And then I did some kind of mixing type stuff, gain staging and that kind of thing. And it does sound fatter. It sounds clearer. It sounds more powerful. But I'm not sure. I don't think I needed to have done it in that way, even though I enjoyed it. So one of the things that turbo cycling doesn't allow you to do is to get into that kind of really, really long-term, deep, sort of stuff, which can be quite enjoyable. But I think one of the reasons I like turbo cycling and why I'm going to keep doing it for the rest of this album and do my absolute utmost. I mean, I've only got a few days, so I kind of have to. But why I'm going to keep on this way of doing things, the fast way of doing things, is that in my schedule, in the number of things that I have to do, this is a highly unusual situation. I've cleared it with Sally, my wife, that I can, just for the next, just for this week, just be in here most of the time, come in after cooking dinner and, be in here for an extra couple of hours. So I'm not helping put the boys to bed. So I'm kind of checked out of family life for a week. But she's finding it tough, and this couldn't go on forever. So this is a situation which I'm not going to have ever again. I mean, I may well have it when I finish the next album, when I've, just for a week. I'll probably say, can I do the same thing? But it's a very, very rare occurrence. So it's not realistic for me to be working in any other way than the kind of very fast session approach. So that's number one. But number two, one of the tracks that I did this session was very fruitful. The other two weren't so fruitful, even though I spent probably 4 hours on each of them too. I actually feel that one of them, the previous version, was probably better, and the other one doesn't seem to be an enormous amount of difference. Okay, so, and I know this is just one, it's just it's a very small sample size, but if we look at that, okay, so 33% of the sessions I did in that way bore fruit, and 66% of them either actively made the thing worse or didn't do very much. right, for a whole day's work. Whereas if I compare what happened on Sunday, where I made stellar progress on 33% of the tracks, good progress on 33%, and some progress on the other 33%. I'm just trying to think, I want to make sure that I'm being absolutely truthful here. Maybe because I might be getting too excited, but let me just have a look. Okay, there is actually one track which may well have gone backwards on Sunday. So 1 out of 10 went backwards, and the other 9 progressed in some way with the turbo cycling approach. Yeah, I had a feeling, as when I said none of them went backwards, I felt like that doesn't feel right somehow. Yeah, there's this one piece which I'm really, really struggling with. The thing is, even if, the question to ask there is, if I'd have spent 4 hours on that track, would it have gone forwards in the kind of like getting deep and spending ages on it route? I'm not so sure. Because the benefit of working fast and doing short sessions, focusing on the biggest problem first, right? Even if that biggest problem is something that you're struggling to work out what the solution could be. Because you're doing a short session, it means that you don't turn away from these problems, these biggest problems, these most kind of crucial problems. And obviously, the closer you get to finishing, the smaller and smaller they get. But there's still always a priority problem, right? I really need to sort out this problem first. This is the most important problem to solve, right? In turbo cycling, because you've only got a short amount of time, you have to focus on that one problem, even if it's a difficult one to solve. Whereas if you've got a lot of time, what ends up happening is you think, oh, I've got loads of time, so I can worry about that really big problem later. I'm just going to do all this other stuff first. And the problem with that is that in a piece of music, everything is reliant on everything else. Everything rests on everything else. It's like this combination of things which work because they're in relation to other things. Okay, so if you start doing this stuff over here without solving the main problem, what you can end up often doing is stuff that you need to change, or that doesn't need to be done, or that is completely irrelevant. And that happens over and over and over again. So by making sure that you're doing a short session and solving the biggest priority problem first and pretty much nothing else, and then cycling through, number one, you're not distracting yourself with these other things that might be unimportant. You're not turning away from the biggest problem. You're solving the biggest problem, and you've got distance between you and listening to what you did in the last session, because you're cycling through. So sort of 10 tunes, you go through the 10 tunes, you're back to the same one. You're like, okay, so now what's the biggest problem that you had to solve, that you have to solve? And it saves so much time, and it saves so much pointless work. You don't do a lot of things that you thought you had to, because you don't need to. Because often, not always, but often, when a bigger problem has been solved, the other things just look after themselves. It's like it's a little bit like a Jenga piece. With Jenga, you pull out this one block and the whole thing comes crashing down. It's like that with problems. Often, if you solve the biggest problem, the other problems either aren't there or don't matter. Even though there is a pull to spending hours and hours on finishing a specific track, and it can feel in the moment, your conscious mind can be saying, "Oh no, I'm making progress. I'll just keep going there. I'm on a roll. I'm really getting deep into it. This is great. I can't move on from this. I'll lose the thread." All that kind of stuff in your head. Just ignoring that and simply going, all right, I'm going to solve this problem as best I can. I'm going to do it in the shortest time possible. Half an hour, hour max. Right? I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to export it and not worry whether it's right or whether it's wrong. I'm just going to do the thing, and then I'm going to export it, and then I'm going to move on to the next one. By doing that, you can finish music in an extraordinarily short amount of time in your schedule. You can make much better progress. We are terrible at measuring how much progress we're making in the moment. There's that classic phrase, we massively overestimate what we can do in a short space of time, say a week, but we massively underestimate what we can do in a year. Yeah? That is true across the board. Yeah. So in terms of this turbo cycling approach, we think, okay, this is a really, really short amount of time. So in order to feel like I'm making progress, I need to do an enormous amount. Right? So I'm going to try and do an enormous amount in this very short space of time. So there we're overestimating what we can do and need to do. But remember, we underestimate what we can do in a longer period of time. Yeah, what gets done in a longer period of time. So by trusting the process and saying, I'm simply going to solve the biggest problem in front of me right now, you won't believe what happens in a week, in a month. What happens is you make way more progress than you could have possibly imagined in these very short spaces of time. So if you are currently thinking, I don't have enough time to make an album, or I don't have enough time to finish my music, I mean, just look at my life, then understand that that doesn't have to be true. It's simply about identifying what, in any given piece of music, what the biggest problem is. I mean, this is particularly at the end. What the biggest problem is in the music, solving that and not worrying about anything else, just solving that problem and doing that in a short space of time, you will notice so much more progress than you expect. Even in the middle of it, even as you're doing it and you think, God, I'm not making much progress on these things. Like on Sunday, I'm not making much progress on these tracks. I kept feeling, but I was like, trust the process. And then by the end, when I listened back to the 3 tracks that I got to yesterday, I was like, wow, they've come an enormous amount simply by solving these problems. So if you believe you don't have enough time to finish music, think again, because you do. It just involves focusing on the priority problem and not allowing yourself to get lost in the process for extended sessions. So that's me for today. Sorry if it was a bit rambling and all over the place. As I said, I'm still thinking this through, and I'm not wedded to any particular method or approach other than like a system like the Music Machine, which is made up of these kinds of methods and approaches. I am always looking to improve. So I don't believe that I have the best solution that is possible. I mean, that's one of the reasons that the Music Machine exists and improves, because I'm always assuming that there's going to be a better solution. And that's why I am questioning, for instance, turbo cycling, why I'm thinking about the downsides and the upsides, because I want to constantly be improving both what I'm doing, but also how I'm helping you. But that sometimes involves me kind of thinking through things live on these podcasts, and that's why sometimes they're a little bit rambling. But now I've stopped rambling, I'm going to stop talking about finishing an album, and I'm going to start finishing one.